is releasing their holiday vaults on November 22nd, I thought that I would take the time today to compare the Natasha Denona Glam palette with the ABH Sultry palette, which is making its return in the vault. But before we get into that, I want to welcome you back to my channel, or if you are new here, then welcome. My name is Kara. I am a 40-year-old professional and a mother of two, and makeup is my happy place. On my channel, we like to mix beauty, brains, and the occasional F-bomb, so if that sounds like something you're interested in, just keep watching. Okay, so let's get into the price point first before we really look at the nitty-gritty specifics. So the ABH palette retails for $65 US or 87 Canadian, and the Vault is going to retail for $64 US or 86 Canadian. Now, as far as I'm aware, you're not going to be able to buy the palette just on its own. It is going to be part of this vault. But in with the vault, you're receiving a full-size mascara, which unfortunately I can't say anything about because I haven't tried it. You are getting a full-size liquid liner, which I have talked about before. I think, honestly, that this is one of the best liquid liners on the market. If you want a matte liquid liner, look no further. It dries so quickly. It's perfectly matte, fully opaque. Beautiful, beautiful product. As well as those two items, you're also going to be getting a deluxe sample of their eye primer, which I have tried, but it didn't make a lasting impression on me. So wasn't terrible, wasn't fantastic, or else I'd probably remember it better. In the Glam palette, there are 15 shades. I'm going to get into them in a moment, but there are 15 shades, and there is a total of 19.25 grams worth of product in here. Whereas in the Sultry, you're getting 14 shades with a combined total of 11.62 grams. So obviously you get an extra shade in here, but the pan sizes are also just overall larger in the Glam palette. Here we have the Glam palette, and then you can compare that to the Sultry palette. So you can see that the pans are a little bit bigger. I don't think it's a huge deal breaker. Like, there's nothing so wildly different about them. I've had this one for years, still haven't hit pan on anything, so either way you slice it, you're getting a good amount of product with either one of these palettes. Okay, so let's take a look at the packaging before we get into the swatch comparisons. So with Sultry, you're getting this gorgeous, shimmery, glittery packaging. They have resisted the urge to put it into that like horrific suede packaging that you saw with Soft Glam and Modern Renaissance, and there were some others as well. This one is much more durable. It doesn't get as stained or as messy. I have heard people complain that the glitter comes off on them, but it doesn't come off on me. Like, even when I'm pretty aggressive about it, I don't have any glitter transferring off onto my hands. And like I said, I've had this for a couple of years and it's still holding up very well. It doesn't look banged up at all, and the magnets are still holding strong. I do like that it flips all the way back. This one also comes with a brush in it, although I've long since decluttered that, but at any rate, there's the packaging for Sultry. Flipping over to Natasha Denona, you've got this like solid plastic kind of packaging here. The nice thing with this kind of packaging is that all of the pans can be popped out, so if you wanted to rearrange the shades, or if you wanted to put this palette and combine it with one of her other palettes like this into a magnetic case, you easily can. Again, it comes with a big mirror. This one does not flip back all the way, so you just have to kind of work around that. Again, not a huge deal breaker because it's got like a really strong, like you can set it however you want and it's not just going to like flop around like some palettes do. So either way, I think you've got great packaging. This one takes the edge for me just because it's sparkly. I'm part crow, so of course the glitter is going to catch my eyes, but either way, it's very functional packaging, nothing over the top, nothing ridiculous, nothing difficult to store, just really nice clean lines on both of them, so I really like that. All right, so moving into the actual shades, if we look at the ABH palette, like I said, there's 14 shadows in there, 7 of them are matte, 7 of them are shimmers, and then with the Natasha Denona Glam palette, let me just cover that up. Again, you get 15 shades, there are 5 mattes, and the rest are all shimmery shadows. They do have a very similar sort of underlying tone to them, that being more on the cool side of neutral, with the exception of that pink shade up here in the ABH palette. And there are a couple of pink undertoned shadows in each of these. All right, so let's not belabor the point. Let's get into the swatches so we can really see what's similar and what is different. I will come right out now and say that these are not dupe palettes by any stretch. They each bring something different to the table, and I'm not going to fully recommend one over the other, simply because the formulation of both is impeccable. The mattes for both of these shadows blend out beautifully. They're creamy, they're smooth, they're pigmented, they're just a dream to work with. The shimmer shadows likewise are also very beautiful. I have a combination of both of the palettes on my eyes today. I really don't think that I could pick one over the other, to be honest. If I didn't have either, I would probably go for the Vault at this point, simply because of that limited edition factor to it. Okay. Let's get into the swatches. Now, how I'm going to do this is I'm going to put a picture up on the screen. I'm going to talk over them. I'll explain what it is that we're looking at, but keep in mind that the top row of shadows is going to be from ABH and the bottom row is from Natasha Denona. We're going to go through the mattes first and then the shimmers, and then we'll come back and wrap it up. Here we go. Okay, I'm not going to go through shade names because the Natasha Denona palette uses the same name multiple times and it's just going to get altogether way too confusing. But if you look at the shadows here, you can see that there's definitely overlap, but there are definitely shades missing from the ABH palette that don't show up in the Natasha Denona. Also, ABH includes a matte black, whereas the Natasha Denona does not have that. It just has a really deep brown. The deep brown that it has, the ABH doesn't. So you kind of have to look at whatever it is that you would get the most use out of. If you want a gray, a coral tone, and a black, ABH has those, whereas Natasha Denona does not. But the lightest shade that Natasha Denona has is much cooler than the cream color in the ABH. All right, with the shimmers, I am going to compare them directly. So we're going to start at the left and move our way to the right. So starting at the left, you can see that the ABH is much icier than the Natasha Denona, which has more of a golden tone to it. The second from the left are very similar to each other. There's really not much difference there at all. They're both this like brassy kind of tone. Likewise, the third one in, both are very peach toned. I think the one in the ABH, although it doesn't really show up as well on this picture as it does in real life, it is a little bit deeper than the Natasha Denona, but for all intents and purposes, they are very similar. Moving over to the shade beside it, the Natasha Denona is deeper than the ABH, but again, same sort of vibes there. Next over from there, we have again sort of a pinky undertone, but the one from ABH is deeper in tone than the one from Natasha Denona. And then next to that, again, you have a really deep chocolatey kind of brown. It is more sparkly in the ABH than it is in the Natasha Denona, but again, very similar vibes, except the ND is a little bit more like a satin than it is a true shimmer. The taupe shade that comes next is very similar, although it's a bit icier with Natasha Denona. And then you can see that there's 3 there from Natasha that ABH hasn't included. As we can see from the swatches, there are definitely points of similarities between these palettes, but they're definitely not dupes of each other. I think that Glam is more cool toned overall, whereas ABH kind of plays the field a little bit in that regard, riding the line of neutral, but has some that are cooler and some that are warmer, and certainly that inclusion of the coral shade that they have really does help to warm up otherwise neutral shadows as well. So if you're looking for tone variety, I think the ABH is a little bit more versatile in that respect, but that's not to take anything away from the Glam palette, especially if you are looking for a cooler toned palette. Again, as I said earlier, in terms of performance, you really can't go wrong with either one of these palettes. I find the mattes just so easy to work with in both, and I find that the shimmers have excellent longevity in both of these palettes as well. They don't crease, they don't fade, they don't flake down into just little bits of dust on my cheeks throughout the day with either of these. So the formula in both of these is impeccable. All right, and at this point, I'm going to wrap the video up. I am not going to try to sway you one way or the other in terms of which one I think you should buy. That is entirely up to you, but I did want to make this video in order to show the comparisons to hopefully help you decide if one or both of these palettes or none of them are going to suit your purposes. What I can say from my own personal perspective is obviously I have both of the palettes and I don't regret purchasing Glam after already purchasing Sultry. I find that they complement each other and I find that I do have a use for both palettes in my own personal collection. That's not to say that I think everybody needs both palettes, but I use both palettes and I'm happy with both palettes. So I thought I would just put my unsolicited 2 cents out there. So I would love to hear from you down below if you are deciding between one of these 2 palettes. Ultimately, what did you choose? Or if you have one, are you going to pick up the other? Like what's your plan in regards to these 2 palettes, if you have a plan at all? I'd love to hear from you down below. Or if you have a neutral or cool toned palette that isn't one of these, I'd like to hear that as well, because it's always good to hear other options, especially if they come in under that 60 some odd dollar price point. All right. But with all that said, thank you so much for taking the time to watch, and I will see you in my next video. Until then, just be a decent human being. Bye for now.